SMTN.
How's it going, everybody, and welcome to Shin Megami Tensei Network, link 332. I'm your host, Spencer Presley, and joining me this week is a very special guest, as if there are any, neutral guests we have on the show, but Barrett, Courtney, welcome for an early podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me, Spencer. I'm doing well. Just a nice little Sunday morning. I'm excited to just kind of start off my day. I've got my coffee. I've got my Cafe LeBlanc coffee and curry Young and Jaya coffee mug right now from a friend of mine. I'm just ready to just have a fun time with you, man.
If I had had more time to prep, I would have done a coffee. I even have a specific coffee. I was like, all right, it's Sunday. I've got time. I'm ready to try this. Unfortunately,
what's your go-to specific coffee?
I don't have any. That's my thing. So gotcha. I specifically actually just recently got coffee. I guess whatever is it coffee. So what is it when it's already ground up and you get it in a bag?
It's coffee grounds.
Okay, so I got coffee grounds sent to me by one of our patrons who runs a coffee shop, and hilariously, it's been in my area for about a month and a half, but I had basically where it got sent, I sent it off to an address, did not tell them they would be expecting coffee beans anytime soon, and they just went, oh, cool, free coffee. So, a month and a half later, I asked her, I was like, hey, did you ever randomly get a box of coffee grounds? And they were like, yeah, it's great. We've been having it for a month. Because, in their fairness, it was just labeled for SMTN, and they have no idea what that is. Whereas, normally anything that gets sent to me, they'll just see my name. Versus, they apparently had just got back from a timeshare, and they were like, oh, I bet this timeshare is trying to bribe us with free coffee.
Yeah. That's great.
So I'm a complete coffee novice in terms of I've had various different kinds. I love basically anywhere from as dark as possible versus as desserty as possible. I'm not picky. I'm just incredibly lazy and never have it at home. I mostly make tea at home just because it's way easier.
Yeah, okay. I like that. One of the love coffee, and I swear this is going to pay off, and I'm going to bring this back around. One of the coffee blends that I really, really loved was funny enough. It was for we got a mailer for Persona 5 Strikers, I think, a couple years back.
I'm already jealous because I know what you're talking about. That press box, that little bento box with coffee. I was very jealous to not get that thing.
It was this bento box, and it was a really sick box as well. Just it had the Strikers cover art on it, which is really, really beautiful. So I remember keeping that around, just the box in and of itself for a while. But it also came with, I don't know if I still have the recipe. It came with the recipe of why am I blanking on
for
his
the
name?
Curry?
Yeah, it came with the recipe for the curry. And it came with this a bag of coffee grounds from a local place in Japan, and it was a small bag, and we only had a couple of days worth of it, but it was very good, and I think about that coffee all the time, and I miss it.
I like to imagine somewhere out there was someone who got that press box and was like, I love coffee, but I'm one of those sickos who has to keep everything sealed, and they're like, this is too much of a collectible. I can never open this bag of coffee now. But no, that is oh man, I always forget about that one because Atlas kind of had a weird thing of, they didn't do press boxes for a while. They would do random, hey, we're going to send you some weird stuff around releases every now and then. And then during the pandemic, I think they did something for Persona 5 Royal, but it might have just been like something as tiny as like, here's a box with like a flyer and some candy in it. Like it wasn't anything crazy. And then somehow, basically after Strikers and on, they've just been sending really random, increasingly elaborate boxes. You know what's funny? Our community has a very interesting stance. Like the one that our community always has whenever we get these, because I will usually do like a live unboxing or something for it. It will always just be no. Don't think that it affects my opinion on anything. Just be mad that Atlas will not sell this to you because most people want to buy those from them. Be like, wow, look at this cool collectible item. Can I have that? No.
Yeah, yeah. It gives the like when Xbox does like, oh, here's like a special edition X-Men Xbox with a cool custom controller. Can we buy it? No. Screw you. And it's like, all right.
I understand them for sometimes, like if they're doing the weird, like that X-Men 1 of 1. Like I get it in terms of the comic collectible thing for it, but then I think of like, you guys made a Halo Xbox and a SpongeBob Xbox, but you would only make one of the Bluey Xbox? You didn't think anyone wanted to buy that horrendous Bluey Xbox?
Oh man. But yeah, to bring it back to the Strikers box, I think that was the only one I remember getting, and that was a cool one. I think, you know what? Oh, I remember the other one. Was the Persona 4 Arena Ultimax box. I remember that during the pandemic as well.
You mean the box that is so large it looks like it holds at least like 2.5 like arcade sticks in it, but actually just holds a pillow?
It was a pillow, and do I have that pillow anymore? No, because I wasn't trying to get stared at by friends if I ever had them over. So maybe I hit up friend of the show, Michael Hyam, and I was like, hey, do you mind if friends come over and stare at you because of this pillow? And he was like, hell no, dog. So Michael Hyam has that pillow.
At least it's not like sitting in some like very fortunate Goodwill. Could you imagine because I imagine there are definitely some like people in the industry who get these boxes and just immediately like, what can I do to get rid of this as quickly as possible? Because they're normally large, have weird novelty items, and they take up a lot of space.
Yep. Oh man.
Well, in terms of also taking up a lot of space, boy, I love how I just completely dismantled your entire actual intro. So everybody listening the first 10 minutes, you better have known who Barrett Courtney was, or else that was a great opening ramble. Barrett, who the hell are you?
Hi, I'm Barrett Courtney. I'm the director of some podcasts over on youtube.com/kindafunnygames, where we cover all sorts of things that we specifically love. We're an independent 11-person operation here in San Francisco, covering what we care about. We have a daily games news show every morning at 10 a.m. Pacific, and daily kind of like big topic game show where we just talk about like big reviews or big topics of discussion. Like most recently, this last Friday, at the time that we're recording this, we just finally recorded our Final Fantasy VII Rebirth spoiler cast that I was on, and so yeah, I've been I'm kind of more so on the production side over at Kinda Funny, and I've been in this industry for 8 years at this point now. Before that, I was over at IGN making gameplay videos, graphics comparisons, first minutes for games and all that stuff. So yeah, that's who I am.
Awesome. And if anyone has not checked out Kinda Funny, I at least recommend you checking out their channel just for the fact of their set, which, ironically, I've been on the production side for too long. I just look at your guys' set and think of every way of how many problems I could have in terms of, no, that screen's not syncing up with that screen, that smoke machine's not going to work today for some reason, where, like, I feel like I've been on the production side of things too long that I would just worry looking at that set for too long.
Oh, trust me, I probably have some ulcers that have grown in my stomach over the last couple of years, just because every morning I anticipate, because I'm usually one of the first people at the office every morning, and I have to turn everything on and make sure everything's looking good for our morning shows, and in the back of my head every morning I'm like, what's going to be the problem today? Why is like the computer not going to get our soundboard? Why is this thing not going to connect to this thing? But when it works, it is a fun set to work on for sure.
I will at least say it's one of those things that I imagine is super easy to take for granted in terms of super fancy. You walk in for the first time, be like, dang, look at how smooth this operation is. I bet this thing never has any headaches or blows up in their face.
Yeah, and it's I love having guests and having them like walk through and like see all of like the production side of things. Like we just had a couple of people from GameSpot over recently, just so they could like check out and see like what we've been up to on the back end stuff. And it's like a nice reminder of like, oh, we do have a really cool space whenever it's not trying to break itself.
No, I definitely feel that as well with it, and it's also been cool. Just like always, like it's always so funny. Of like, I think the era a lot of people. It's always so hard to say, especially with like how long like Kind of Funny's been around. But you were there for like the actual spare bedroom eras, right?
I was a fan back then. So,
Okay.
I started at Kind of Funny back in 2019.
Okay,
And
yeah.
then
So that would
before
have been
that,
like
I
in the
was
above the comic book shop day.
yeah. So I was at the second studio for its last like in-person year, and then shortly after that, we worked from home for a couple of years. After that, while also trying to get this new studio set up. So, but yeah, I was a fan back then. But working with Kevin, who's the production guy, who's been with Kind of Funny nearly since the beginning, I've heard all of the horror stories of trying to run a YouTube channel in like the tiniest spare room in a San Francisco apartment, like way back in the day, 9 years ago.
Yeah, nothing can go wrong there, especially when at the end of the day, it's also like four people's apartment.
Yeah, exactly.
So Barrett, you have been like we talked about earlier. You've been doing Kind of Funny for many years. You were at IGN before then. I really wanted to invite you on for a long time, just because Kind of Funny. A lot of fake Persona fans. They're always making comparisons to Shin Megami Tensei. We had to get the real ones here. Unfortunately, Blessing did not answer my DM, so you were my second pick. So I had to get you on.
Wow, I'm your sloppy second.
Well, I mean,
I guess not in sloppy seconds, but I was your second choice.
With the chance to get sloppy, there's potential for sloppy on these seconds at least with it. So no, joking aside, you had done last year and a little bit earlier this year a Persona ranking video. So if like no one's ever kind of seen any of your previous ones, either with like Assassin's Creed or like Batman and stuff, what's kind of like the quick like pitch line with it? Because it's not like a traditional like you're just sitting there on tierranker.com clicking around for an hour.
Yeah, so for the longest time, just a little bit of history here. Before I was even working at IGN, I was kind of making my own independent YouTube stuff, and I've been making video essays for 9 years around that time, and it was always just like pre-scripted. Let's talk about something that I'm really, really passionate about. And way back in the day, it started with like movies, and then it kind of transformed into video games for a little bit. And then when I started at Kind of Funny, it was a weird year. I started back in 2019, and for me personally, it was kind of like not the biggest year in terms of video games. I was like, I have a lot of free time, and I want to play games, and so I put myself on the quest to review and rank every major Legend of Zelda game in the franchise, and that being determined by Nintendo of what they consider like the big main releases. And so that was such a fun project, albeit a very, very, very long project where I think the final video for that was around 4 hours long. And I remember when I finished that, I was like, oh man, this was so fun. Like I played the games in like weird Zelda timeline order to have like a weird perspective on the quote unquote storytelling throughout the games. I was like, oh man, that was so fun. I'm never doing that again. And then the pandemic hit, and there was a lot of free time at home. And I was like, okay, I got nothing going on. Let's try Assassin. Like I was trying to think of like if I was to do another franchise, I was like, oh, you know what? Like Assassin's Creed would be a fun one to do. And so I remember the only reason I did like an Assassin's Creed in review ranking video where I'm not just like reviewing my thoughts on the game, I'm breaking down like cool little lore tidbits that I'm picking up across Zelda and then Assassin's Creed. and all this stuff. And I was successfully able to make that a shorter video. I think that was like roughly 2 hours long, because I'm also like doing a whole story recap for each game and trying to get into like the kind of breaking down like what emotional moments hit for me and all this stuff. And then fast forward a couple of years, and I had finally come to terms with like, I think if I'm going to do one more of these types of videos, I think it's going to be Persona. I'd gotten to Persona back in, oh man, let's see, was that 2017? I was working at IGN, and I was I was a gameplay capture artist. So that means like you're assigned a game and you're doing a lot of video content around that game, like recording and editing like the first 15-20 minutes of a game, doing a graphics comparison if necessary, doing cool little video features of like, hey, check out like this little thing you may have missed, all that stuff. And I remember getting into work one day back in 2017, or I remember the day. It was February 14th, because I remember that was the day Persona 5 was originally supposed to come out in the West. And then it got delayed. So we had the game for like 2 months, which was crazy, and kind of unheard of. And so I remember getting to my desk, and there's a copy of Persona 5. I was like, God damn it, I don't want to play this like 100-hour JRPG, because to give like even more history, like I really loved JRPGs when I was like a little kid, and like I had babysitters who would play like Final Fantasy X with me, Final Fantasy VII, Chrono Trigger, and then I kind of like grew out of that for a majority of my life. And so like I always appreciated JRPGs, but like outside of like a random Pokemon here and there, I was just like I would kept telling myself it wasn't for me. And so I had to play Persona 5 for work, so I really had no I had no out. And it was like 10 hours into the game. I finished up Kamoshida's Palace. I was like, damn, I think I love this game. And so that's what really got me into Persona. And then fast forward a couple of years later, we're still kind of working from home. Like a lot of other companies have started like going back into the office, but we had the unfortunate kind of time where we could start working together, but we didn't have a studio because we had started working on the studio at this new studio at the beginning of the pandemic, and it was going way slower than we wanted it to. So we didn't have an office to go back to. So we had like a long time where we were working from home. And at one point I was like, you know what, screw it. Maybe I'll load up some old Persona games on a certain handheld device, and maybe, I'll get a Persona 3 on there, and I've got Persona 4 Golden on Steam and all this stuff. And I was like, I'm just gonna play these. In the back of my head, maybe I'll do a ranking video one day. And I think it was, I forget what made me decide to finally do it, but I finally played through the majority of the series. I think I had like the Q games left. I had like Persona 2 Eternal Punishment and like I think like a Persona Q, maybe PQ2 left. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this whole ranking video, and I'm gonna try to make it as short as possible, because if you remember my Zelda video, my original one was 4 hours long. The Assassin's Creed video is 2 hours long, and I knew realistically if I tried to dive deep into the lore as much as I did with Zelda and like the story as much as I did with Assassin's Creed, I was like, this would be like a 10-hour video. So it's definitely not just like let me just share some of my thoughts while I'm doing like a tier maker thing, but it is a pre-scripted. Sorry, I rambled a lot there just to give you the straightforward answer.
No, you're good. I mean, there's a lot of context as well ahead of it, because doing something like this, it is always a lot harder, because like it's that thing of, even in your video, there are games that aren't covered, but that's because there are so many weird tangents of like, all right, do we really count Persona 3 and 5 as two different games, or like how do we want to like different like versions and different things for it? Because
is it worth it for me to play 200 more hours of like let's play Persona 3 Portable as well? Is it worth it to rank both Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal and all that? And so I was trying to make this list that's kind of as simple as I possibly could, one version for each entry, right? Because Persona 3 especially was like the weird one in that case. And I think like Persona for Arena, right? There's technically Arena in and of itself, but then there's Arena Ultimax, but that also includes the contents of Arena. So I was like, I'm just doing Arena Ultimax, screw it. And so yeah, I was trying to make it as simple as possible, and it's like this 50-minute video where kind of equate it to a bit more in-depth version of like Watch Mojo ranking videos, where there's already like a determined ranking, and it goes into like number 12, and then I show which game it is, and then I like dive deep into like, or not deep, but I dive into like what my highlights are, what things stood out to me, what spoke to me as like what made me love this game, what I didn't vibe with a particular game, all this stuff. And so yeah, and that was like that was a weird challenge for this video too, was for Zelda and Assassin's Creed, what I would do for those kind of productions is that I would play a game, let's talk about Zelda specifically, because I was still, we were still in the office, it was before the pandemic. I would play a game, write my review of the game, record that section of the video, edit it, and then move on to the next game. So I was slowly editing the Zelda video over the course of like 8 months, like game by game. And Assassin's Creed was similar, where I was playing the game, writing the script for that game. And Assassin's Creed, I think the thing that helps me there was I recorded it all kind of in one go, so I could have like a realistic kind of like, all right, how do we make this not 4 hours? And so the tough thing with Persona for me was like, the only requirement I had for myself was like, you need to beat each game. But by the time I got to writing the script, I was like, oh man, it's been like maybe like a year and a half since I played some of these. So that was like a unique challenge for myself, just because I wouldn't consider myself the most like natural writer. Like I think there's a reason I was on the video production side of IGN and not like a regular like writer or anything on over there. And so yeah, so that was like an interesting one. So I would have to like kind of go like back and like watch some like highlight moments of like, why did this work for me? Like, why didn't this work for me? And all this stuff. And, again, maybe boot some of the older games on a certain handheld device and kind of like, oh, what was the flow of this combat? And why did I like it? Why did I not like it? What were the small little details that made me think of like the modern games and all this stuff? And so, yeah, it was such a fun video to make. And it's a series that really, over the course of the pandemic, just because I had so much damn free time, I was able to really fall in love with, and not just be the Persona 5 guy, right? Which, I know plenty of people, as myself for a while, was teased there of like, he just likes Persona 5. He doesn't care about the others. And so, yeah, it was a big passion project of mine. And it was, I think we released that near the end of last year, and then I did an updated version earlier this year, which included both Persona 3 Reload and Persona 5. Oh man, what's the Persona 5 Tactica? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I did a slight updated version where I just kind of updated my review for Persona 3 with the Reload kind of updates, and then recorded a new segment for Persona 5 Tactica and slotted them in their appropriate places, in my opinion.
So, obviously, when you had started the original plan, you didn't know about something like Tactica and even Reload for it. Was there like that oh fuck moment last year in June where you're like, oh?
Yeah, so that was
because it was like, do you just hold it off till February and wait needlessly long, or like?
Yeah, so that was an interesting one. So last year, I believe, right? Yeah, 2023, or back in 2022 when we launched the Spare Bedroom, which is our current Kind of Funny studio. We did this whole like Patreon drive, and when we hit certain goals, like dollar amount goals, we would like promise projects and all this stuff. And one of the early ones that we hit was that I was going to do 4 video essays essentially within the year. And when I pitched that to kind of like the my manager Tim, I had like 4 ideas for video essays. So it's not like, I have to make we hit this tier, now I have to like make up 4 video essays. Like I had a plan. And so like the first 2, it was like kind of a God of War retrospective and recap, kind of leading into Ragnarok and kind of breaking down Kratos' character. The second one was a similar thing with Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, kind of like breaking down why that game's special to me. And I had two other videos. I think one was like, depending on the quality of Gotham Knights, it was either going to be like, does Gotham Knights fail or succeed at like carrying on the Arkham legacy? And I forget what I think the fourth one was like an idea that I had that I just couldn't quite like get pen to paper on. Like, it was a nice idea about like exploring the mind in video games, and like that would include Persona 5, that would include games like Psychonauts and stuff, but I just didn't have like an in as a writer to like dive deep into it. So those last two video essays, when I got to like getting those ready, I was like, I don't want to write about Gotham Knights. Like, I feel just so like neither way about that game. Like, I just don't have the passion to talk about it, and I don't have the in as the writer for this fourth video essay. So there was like early 2023. It was like January. I remember I was walking my dog. It was like a Sunday morning. I was like, I don't know what to do about these essays. And then it clicked for me where it was like, Tears of the Kingdom is coming out in a couple months. Do a follow-up to your big Zelda video from a few years ago. Add in some of the smaller games. I think I added like the Oracle games, and then there's another Game Boy Advance game, I think, and then Tears of the Kingdom, and review those and like add them to the ranking and stuff. And then it was that moment as well where I was like, it's time to do the Persona video and kind of have that be my last big kind of ranking video. And I was like, all right, it's time to work on this, because I remember that's what like really kicked into gear of like, all right, I have these like 2 Persona games left. You know what? It wasn't Persona Q2. I think it was all 3 of the original games. So it was Persona 1, Persona 2, Innocent Sin, and Persona 2 Eternal Punishment that I had left. And so I was like, all right, I got a couple months until Tears of the Kingdom comes out. I'm going to spend these next few months just plowing through those games. And so... yeah, and then I have to start focusing on the Zelda thing. So then once I had beaten those games, I had to kind of put the Persona video in the back of my mind, work on the Zelda video. And then once that was done, it was time to work on the Persona video. And then Summer Games Fest comes around, and it's like, all right, Persona 3 Reload leaks like a couple days before like the big Xbox event or whatever. I was like, oh, damn, that's so exciting. I wonder if it's coming out this year. Because that would, like, maybe I can, give myself some time to work on this video. And it's like, all right, not just Persona 3 Reload, Persona 5 Tactica. I was like, oh, Jesus Christ, 2 games. And I did have the pause of like, do I delay this to next year? And to bring it back to like the Patreon funding thing, it was, for me, it felt important of like, I said I was going to do 4 video essays within 12 months, and I kind of want to hit that. So I'm going to continue on doing this Persona ranking video and not worry about Persona 5 Tactica or Persona 3 Reload. And what I'll do as a nice little bonus, like I'll do my kind of initial ranking without those 2 games, and the version of Persona 3 that I reviewed for that was Fez. And so I was like, screw it. I'm just going to work on the games that I was planning on working on originally. And then as a nice little bonus, because the way that I edited and like wrote the script, I felt like it would be easy to just like, all right, let's add a few bit more blurbs for Persona 3 for like the Reload content. And then I can just like write like a page for Persona 5 Tactica, record those bits, and then just slot them into the original video. And hopefully most people would be none the wiser. There is a key difference though, that in the updated version, you can see what the new recorded parts are, because I do have a Persona 3 tattoo now. So if you have a keen eye, you can tell where the updated parts are. And so that was really like just my key to it. And I kind of figured as just like a video content creator, of like, oh, that might be like a nice little like kind of boost for the Persona ranking videos. Like we'll have the initial kind of video come out a little bit before Tactica, where people are excited for, the 10th Persona 5 spinoff game. And then, I can kind of cheat and double dip and have a second version of the video come out when Reload comes out. And so, yeah, that's what I did, and yeah, it was a really fun time, and let me tell you, binging through Persona 3 Reload in the course of 2 weeks and then having to write about it is probably the least fun I had, because that is a very emotional game, and so that was a tough one to really talk about.
No, yeah, it's not a fun one to push through. Like pretty much once you get to October, you're like, damn, bro, this game sucks.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the like I like so yeah, I reviewed it for Kind of Funny. I was the lead reviewer on it, and so it wasn't just like rushing through it to like start working on this video. It was like we got a review copy, and so I was like trying to hit embargo with that, and so we got it. I want to say like 15 days before embargo or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, and I remember thinking to myself of like, for Kind of Funny, we're a bit laissez-faire. We're not an IGN. We're not a GameSpot where it's like we're writing a whole scripted thing, and here's our review, and here's the definitive score. We've beaten the game. Like we're 11 people. We choose what we want to play, and when it comes to a review embargo, if none of us have beaten a game, but we've played a good chunk of the game, we can still share our thoughts and kind of give our review so far and our score so far. But for me with Persona 3, I was like, I can only properly review this game if I see the ending, because I need to know if they nailed the ending before I can give this game a score. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to binge through this game in 2 weeks. And, the first week was just, fun vibes and just dancing around the city at nighttime with that new nighttime song, and, just grinding in Tartarus, having a good old time. And then you get to like the second week of me playing that game where I'm finally hitting like all of the really big emotional beats. And I'm just like, misery after misery. So yeah, I remember being a shell of a human being after playing Persona 3 Reload, which I think hit harder on the second time as well, just because when I played Fez, I did not binge through it nearly as quickly as I made myself binge through Reload. But you don't know what you're getting into, and I think like knowing what's coming around the bend on a second playthrough of Persona 3, for me at least, it hit even harder, and then it hit even more on the third time when I went for my platinum run for Reload. So yeah, that was like, it's to bring it back to the video of the ranking and stuff. It was just I love doing those types of videos. Quick little context here: I've kind of retired from video essays because they definitely are way too much work and they exhaust the hell out of me. And usually the types of video essays I like to do involve diving into an entire series, and it's so much work. But for Persona, it was such a unique one for me because I felt like still such a new fan. Like even though I gotten into Persona 5 7 years ago at this point, which is crazy to think about. I really only fell in love with the entire series like 2 or 3 years ago at this point. So it was just like I was just gonna put this video out, not knowing like what the vibes were specifically for like Persona 1 or Persona 2 Innocent Sin versus Eternal Punishment, or what people felt about the fighting game, which I really adored, and all this stuff. And so that was like a fun little like, hey, here are my thoughts. I have no idea what the community thinks about like the overall kind of vibes of the entire series. And it was cool to have like a lot of the response be like, oh, that's an interesting take, but like I'm not going to yell at you about it. Like it's not my personal opinion, but I see where you got there and stuff. And so that was really encouraging, because I'm getting into the fandom of a certain series, any series, it can always be a little bit intimidating. I remember being really nervous before putting the original version of this video out and being like, oh god, they're gonna hate me because this is where I put Persona 4, or this is where I put Persona 1 or something like that, or this is where I put the dancing game. So I was just like really nervous, but it was overall a pretty positive reception, which I was thankful for.
I would say in my years of doing this over like the last like 10 plus years, I see a lot of different people's opinions, especially from like the whole series of like Megaten, and I feel like ironically with Persona, that community is so for as much as people love to joke that it only exists of 3, 4, and 5 fans, realistically, everyone's pretty understanding of most lists. Like, the only times I ever really see a large, not even like negative reaction, but like the attention grabbers will always be where 5 is on your list, assuming it's not like within the top 4, 3. Just because, like, I remember when I did my last one, I think like 2021 or something, or yeah, it was right after SMT5, so it would have been like January 2022. And I remember when people look at my list, because it was like, all right, I'm an insane person who's played like all of these like Japanese cell phone only games, like episode like Aegis first mission on Japanese cell phones. Like, I've played all of these, so I can like unfortunately tell you which ones are good and which ones are just increasingly garbo. And when you put them all together for it, like, I think in my list I had like P5 is a C and like P5R is like a low B, which pretty much might be like giving it like a 2, which is hilarious because like you're comparing all of these games to each other. It's not like you're grading them on an actual 0 to 10 scale.
Yeah,
Cause like
it's like a weighted kind of
exactly, because it's like, oh cool, let me review a bunch of 8s and see where these 8s all land. So the funny thing with that one is like, I was like, no, like, obviously I wouldn't play all of these games if I thought even one of them was like like complete like garbage or whatever with it. It's just so funny of like, I think 5 is that one that gets a lot of people's attention. 3, I think less so at the moment, but especially now with in a post-reload world, because it's been so interesting watching this remake. Because really, what I was worried when it first got announced was like, okay, I was one of the people in the camps of I did not think that that game needed a remake. Depending on how they do it, because obviously Reload is a weird case of like, it is a high level of effort, but clearly a lower budget title when you kind of compare it to like other main, like, even if you just compare it to like a Metaphor or something like even like an SMT5 on Switch and stuff, where like you see that like
100%. Like I remember that being a big worry of Chaim and myself, was like, when you'd see trailers and like running around the school, it felt a little sterile. And we were really worried of like, we don't know if this is going to be it. And, you know, thankfully I think, you know, like, I think what the game excels at, I think kind of like lets that other stuff fall to the wayside. But there was a little bit, and like, you could still kind of tell, like, it was, I think, was Reload the first game that they played around with in Unreal?
No, so that would be 5, SMT5.
Okay. It was something about, there was something updated, it felt like, for next gen, and you could tell that they were still learning in terms of this being like the correct me if I'm wrong here, from my understanding, like the newer Persona team who kind of like came in charge with Royal, and have been kind of like not learning the ropes, but kind of like finding their footing the last, like, again, crazy, like 6 years, ever since like the OGs left to find Studio Zero. And so you could tell that Reload felt like a big test drive of like, you could feel it was a smaller team. You could feel that they were kind of learning the infrastructure of next gen hardware, and all of this stuff. And so, yeah. And even compared to, you know, terrible bitrate videos of Metaphor ReFantagio, because so much is going on in that game that any YouTube upload of it is just not going to do it justice. You can tell that like so much is going on in terms of visual direction and filling in that world. But yeah, I remember that being like a big concern for Michael Chaim and I before Reload came out. Because yeah, sorry, back to your point. But I just very.
Oh no,
very
no. I mean, I completely agree, because it was pretty much a long running. It was pretty much a long running worry for me that. Even watching trailers, I didn't feel confident about Reload until it was in my hand, and that was one actually I did not play until release date. I streamed it for like the first like 4 or 5 hours, and as I was playing through that opening segment of the game with everybody, the chat and myself had a lot of things noticing, of being like, I think if this was any other game, or if this was any other kind of direction, you could look at a lot of things and be like, okay, these lack of animations are pretty low budget. This is like a bit of this, or like kind of like it's really easy to nitpick, but there's two kind of sides to it. One, the overall like style and art direction for Persona 3 as a whole really holds up, and you can feel it with that kind of PS2 level nostalgia that I didn't really know it needed to be there. Because obviously there's things that you can say like, okay, this could have looked better, or this could have been maybe more expanded.
Or this feels and looks stiff and stuff like that.
Exactly, but like they clearly, for better and for worse, they started that project as, okay guys,
we're huge fans of the original.
yeah, like we are to a fault going to only be making this feel like a remake of the PS2 game. Like this is not meant to be a final, because like a great comparison is like comparing this to like an FF7 remake. Like that is all about playing on your twist, like making things a greater like expanding every little like detail and stuff. It's like no, this is that PS2 game. Like that's it. That's all you're getting. And for a lot of people, I think surprisingly it was like, oh, that's fine. And I mean, I think it's really easy to be like, oh, well, it doesn't have X or it doesn't have Y. And even with something like the Answer, like being sold separately, I've never known anyone who bought Reload, whether they played 30 hours, 30 minutes, or platinumed it, who at the end of that playthrough went, yeah, I don't know if it was worth $70. Like, I think it really is a testament to that game that even with what they shipped, it still standed so strong on its own.
100%.
So, I mean, I know you said this is probably going to be your last one. I think you meant to say after you do all the Megaton games ranked, or you're now going to play through all of those ones, understand what Jack Bros on the Virtual Boy is like, and have a life-changing experience.
So here's the thing, Spencer, is no, I'm never doing that. And that's an interesting thing with SMT as a whole. Like I feel like a phony coming onto this podcast, because my big kind of foray into SMT was 5, and that was like the first one I really tried when that came to Switch. Was that 2021?
2021, yeah.
Yeah. And I reviewed it and very self-aware reviewed it as a, hey, I'm a Persona fan coming into the big series for the very first time. How do I feel about it? And then was ridiculed by the entire SMT audience for that. And so, because I didn't really vibe with it, and it wasn't in terms of gameplay. I don't know if I'd played Persona 3 Fez yet, but it wasn't like in terms of gameplay or anything. It was just in terms of setting and world and vibes, right? I really love Persona because it feels so unique in terms of its setting compared to other JRPGs, which are either very sci-fi, cyberpunk types of vibes, or on the very opposite end of the spectrum, fantasy. Right. And obviously Persona gets into, we're going to another world where the manifestations of your inner heart are turning into big monsters that you can use to fight. It gets all crazy. But like the kind of core thing to it is the being in the modern day, going to class, and kind of helping these teens figure out their lives that are ahead of them. Right. And SMT 5, at least, and maybe this isn't true for the entire series, there was just something about like the post-apocalyptic kind of vibe to it that I wasn't really vibing with. And I am very much aware that is not a SMT problem. That is definitely just a personal preference, me problem kind of thing. And so, yeah, and that's like the interesting thing with Metaphor Refantasio coming up is like, the setting in the world, it's like, it's not really my vibe, but there is something that feels a bit different with it in terms of kind of feeling not like cyberpunk. What's the other punk that I'm thinking of? Kind of that, like, no. Kind of old school, but high tech technology, kind of like mixing and intertwining.
Oh, steampunk.
Steampunk. Thank you. Like, there's a bit of like steampunk kind of like influence. It feels like, although it is also kind of a fantasy world. And so that's like my like in terms of like gameplay flow and like what you're actually like the activities you're doing in Metaphor, it seems like I'm like sign me the hell up for. It's just like in terms of like setting and world that I'm wondering if that's going to kind of keep me hooked throughout what I imagine is going to be another 100-hour RPG in the year of our Lord 2024. Oh my God. There's been way too many JRPGs this year.
Just saying that you've manifested 3 more to get announced next month.
Oh God. Oh my God. We're so close to SGF. And so that was my kind of big hang up with SMT. Again, very, very much understanding of like, I don't think this is like a negative quality of the game or the franchise. This is just like, again, coming into the perspective of there's a lot of new Persona fans out there. Let me talk to them of like, are you going to vibe with this or not? And then the SMT audience ridiculed me.
Well, that's the interesting thing as well, especially with 5 being somebody's first coming off of Persona. They're so very much different in everything with it, of like the map design, the story, the tone, the vibes, and everything with it. Of like, ironically, 5 is also one of those weird ones of like, it's got a really interesting cast, but the way it tells the story, you don't always spend a lot of time with them. It's very split up and diverse, especially like without getting into any spoilers. There are very few social elements of like you returning to Tokyo often and doing X, Y, and Z. Like Tokyo pretty much just kind of becomes like a mini map that you eventually just kind of forget to go back to like the world of Dot and stuff. So right. I definitely get that with it, of it not being one of those ones for everyone. There's always like these kind of like stepping stone games that I think fit for a lot of other people. I think if someone like had never played a Persona, I think 5 is great because you don't really have those expectations, and it'll get you into that like battle system, baby steps you enough with like demon negotiation without like feeling either too hard or too easy. Whereas like if you compare the negotiations in Persona 5 Royal versus like SMT 5, the ones in Royal are like a complete cakewalk by comparison, but the systems are completely different. Whereas like my go-to, which is everyone's least favorite recommendation, but I think it is such a perfect stepping stone game to get out of Persona and into other Atlas games, is Tokyo Mirage Sessions, because it's...
Oh, that's interesting that, like, not everybody agrees with that, because I feel like everybody I talk to who's a big Atlas head, like, always shouts out Tokyo Mirage Sessions.
Tokyo Mirage Sessions, all 7 of us fans really, really love that game. It's great because it does one of my favorite things with JRPG, outside of obviously looking great, great cast, and great music. It is a 20 to 30 hour RPG.
Love that.
And like even if you do all the side stuff, it's a game that has like no fat. You can skip all the side stuff, no problem, but it's always really rewarding in terms of unlocking new outfits or songs or other things like that. The Switch version's great as well because it runs perfectly. It's way, way, way better than the Wii U version. And it's just one of those things that if you are someone who is either into J-pop or will not let J-pop deter you from a game, it's fantastic because it's just one of those things of really, really good bonds. The cast and the characters are super unique. They're all, wait for it, adults, not in high school, which is always a plus. So it's that thing of like, okay, I get it if you're not into Tokyo Mirage Sessions. That's a good one for it. Thankfully, we now have like another one, although this game also completely bombed. Soul Hackers 2 was a great one of just, that's just straight up Shin Megami Tensei in a very different kind of way. Now, its biggest problem is that it's just not a great sequel to Soul Hackers 1, but that was not even in comparison to the game. It's like, it, for the love of God, should have just been called Soul Hackers subtitle here. Throwing a 2 on there was never going to help it. It was like, oh, sweet. A sequel to a 3DS game that was a remake of a Saturn game only released in Japan? Sign me up, everybody. But, I mean, what it does is, again, fantastic cast, really interesting setting, the music, the art, the cast and everything really, really carry that plot with it. It has no similarities in terms of what you're really going to get with Persona in terms of the story or the world, but that gameplay, the demon negotiation, all of that stuff is there in like a super digestible, less than 50-hour-long game.
Yeah, that was I remember that was another one we didn't like do a full review on, but I remember my coworker Blessing and I played a lot of Soul Hackers, and we were into it, and I don't know what didn't grab me about it. I think I also had the unfortunate thing where I played it I reviewed it on Steam Deck, I think maybe,
Hmm.
and that was an interesting. Where there were like, especially in like the review period, where devs are probably still trying to work on stuff and update some things. They're just like assets missing like every once in a while, and it just became like a weird experience, I think, for kind of like the handheld kind of thing. But
Well, yeah, in 2022 was also a weird year of like that was them really dipping their foot into PC ports for like the first time as well, because that
right,
was the same year we got Persona 3, 5, and Soul Hackers all on PC at launch.
right,
So like I always get that one as well as especially unlike Tokyo Mirage Sessions, which does feel like very like high production value. Obviously not like Persona 5 or like SMT5 levels, but like it has that Nintendo budget. You can see it on there.
mm.
Soul Hackers very much has that like budget feel, like even more
Oh
so
yeah,
than like when we were talking about like Persona 3 Reload, not feeling like it's getting that Persona 6 budget. Like
hmm,
this is clearly a Unity game. It's writing a lot off of its art direction and not off of like the models looking like immaculate or the animations always being super smooth and just like little things like that that kind of like hurt it in that way.
yeah. I definitely remember that, but there's still like definitely like a heart there, and I forget what else was going on in 2021 where that made me fall off of it, because I was enjoying that one for a bit. Um, maybe it made me go
It
back
was
to
too many
other.
games, man. It was too
Yeah,
many games.
it was too many games. I think that was also around the time. I'm trying to think of when in the year.
So it was August of 22 when it came out.
I think. Oh, you know what? I think that's when I was wrapping up Persona 4 and then maybe transitioning over into Persona 3.
Hmm.
I think. So that was just a lot of like JRPG for me.
No, and I mean that's always I think as well. Like even someone like me, I always try to be as mindful as I can of like not burning out of these kind of games, but like especially in like you mentioned 2024 being so crazy in terms of how many kind of games there are like this. It's really easy to just kind of be like, wow, there is a lot of RPG going on right now. Like a great example, I would love to start playing Aiden Chronicles, but I'm like, I
Mm,
still got to play Rebirth. I still got to jump. I don't even own Unicorn Overlord. I'm sure I will love it, but I'm like, it's just like to the point now where like I can't even justify just letting it like sit on my backlog and buying it. I just
right.
got to be like, I got to get to some other games, man.
Yeah. Yeah. It's too much. Video
N-
games, settle down.
Yeah, they won't. They won't. Unfortunately, they've just got a death grip on our complete time. But at least kind of looking at like either Atlas games or Megami Tensei as a whole, are there any ones that are kind of out there that either you haven't gotten a chance to dip your foot into, or have you kind of like morbidly curious?
I'm trying to think of like all the other like spin-off series and all that stuff. Like I would love to get back to Soul Hackers at one point. I feel like there was another one that I was interested in.
Did you get to mess around with the HD port of Nocturne much?
So that's SMT3, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I have not, but I've heard so many people talk up SMT3 a lot. So that is definitely like that is in kind of my the corner of my vision of possibly wanting to check out at one point whenever video games chill out and I have a free couple months, but yeah, and then also like Tokyo Mirage Sessions, like shout out to Andrew Goldfarb, who I was a coworker with at IGN, the patron saint of Persona and SMT as a whole. I feel like back at IGN back in the day, he would talk about Tokyo Mirage Sessions a lot. Of like, hey, you should check this out. You should check it out. It's really good. If you like Persona, you'd really enjoy it. So I feel like I owe it to Andrew Goldfarb to check out Tokyo Mirage Sessions at some point. And then there's what are the Persona Q games kind of riffing
Oh,
off
Etrian
of?
Odyssey.
Yeah. Like I've seen a bit of Etrian Odyssey, and I'm like, that seems fun. I think I would want to check that out. I don't know if it's worth it, but
The Etrian games are great, especially if you like considering how much you liked Persona Q1. Ironically, one of the weird ones that always gets super forgotten. We didn't get the second one, but there is a actual Etrian mystery dungeon crossover game they localized. and
Mm.
it is just straight up Spike Chunsoft Mystery Dungeon. Like, if you ever play like either Shiren or any of the Pokemon Mystery Dungeons, it's that, but with all the tropes of Etrian Odyssey. And that was
Oh,
a
okay.
super, super, super great game on like the 3DS for it. But it was like, even by like mid 3DS era, like it pretty much fell off the face of the earth. Of like, there's a reason we didn't get the sequel. Like, it was niche franchise spin-off of another niche franchise, was like destined to completely bomb here. But like, Etrian Odyssey at least always sells like well enough, and like I'm always really curious to kind of see what that team does next. I don't really count their Switch HD port as like a big thing, because like I like to imagine they're going to have like their first big console game debut, because they still really haven't. They were doing 3DS Etrian Odyssey games all the way up into like 2018.
Mm.
Like, they were doing it up so late. The last Etrian Odyssey game that came out literally has the redheaded girl from Metaphor in it as like a guest character.
Oh, that's so weird. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, like, they because of like how long ago they teased like Metaphor back when it was just ReFantasio,
Yeah.
or like, no, it was always just Metaphor, like Refan or like Project ReFantasy.
Yes.
They included it in a lot of funny little things. Like, people even forget, like, they had the soundtrack of like, there were like I think 3 or 5 tracks from the game in Catherine Full Body you could just listen to just cause.
Wait, really? Oh
Yeah,
my gosh. That was a fun one that I played in the middle of my Persona kind of like deep dive into the
that's a good
series.
like
Was
cleansing game.
Yeah, Catherine, for the first time. I remember playing that on Switch, and that was a fun time. And I was like, man, it feels like I should talk about this in Persona, because it felt like such an underrated important moment of them using that game to kind of learn how to mess around with Unreal for Persona 5. And it was just like, yeah, it was a cool game. It was a very fun puzzle game. But I don't like, that's crazy that you could just listen to Metaphor music in that.
Yeah, the only negative to that was they unfortunately replaced it with music that was originally like the PS2, like I think like there was Digital Devil Saga songs and like things like that. So they were like,
That got like
let's
kinda
get rid of
lost.
these SMT songs. Let's put some Metaphor songs instead.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
It's like, well, yeah,
Where's the history atlas? Come on.
well, they're aware of their history, Barrett, but you need to like give them DLC costume money first before they do that. That's like when I thought it was like so funny when they showed up the collector's edition costumes for Metaphor. I was like, I will bet you $100 that like all the Persona 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 costumes are just straight up texture rips from the DLC costumes in Persona 5. I'm like, I
Oh,
bet you
100%.
there is no way in hell that they have even touched those costumes.
Yeah, that would not surprise me.
Because like you mentioned the like engine and stuff for Metaphor, I was just double checking on it here, and it's so funny that they did not decide to change it. Like, and I get it. This is the wild thing with Metaphor. Metaphor, the game we are getting in October 2024, which does not feel real. Metaphor is running off the GFD engine and not Unreal or anything crazy like that. The
So
GFD
it's
engine,
the proprietary engine that they
it
use
is,
for 5, right?
yeah, it is still the same crusty ass PS3 engine that they used for
Oh my
Catherine
god.
way back in the day. And so like when I see like Metaphor looking a little framey, I'm like, might have wanted to not use that PS3 engine, guys. But I'm like, I get it. Like, that team has been working on this for so long that it's like, I'll take the jank if you, like, it leads to like you guys, because obviously it is a stupid amount of money to have to learn a new engine, get a bunch of developers
Yeah.
and stuff with it for it. But like, we're kind of getting up there now. Like, they're almost kind of like in a Bethesda sense of like being like, do we need to keep this engine? Like, is there like a tax write off you guys have that like you want to explain to us? But like,
I could definitely see them letting it go for their next game, right? Like, because they have been working on this game since like it's been 8 years, right? Like, it was pretty much like after Persona 5 came out.
Pre-production, it immediately started in December of 2016.
That's
Is when they
insane.
announced
Like,
it.
you released your biggest game, at least in Japan at the time, and then you're just like, all right, back to work, and we're gonna spend
Well, I mean,
another
because
8
you got to
years
remember,
working on one
they
game.
didn't take the whole team from Persona 5, but they took
Right.
all the heavy hitters, because that was their big
Yeah.
thing. When they saw how much it had sold in Japan, they were like, this is our chance to escape the Persona like hell, for lack of a better word, of having to just be the ones making these main games forever, because
Right.
like they've never really been a team who wanted to always make just the same thing. Like this is
Yeah.
at the end of the day like the team who is making those PS2 SMT games and stuff with it. So they like to stretch it. I mean, and again, going back to like even
Yeah,
Catherine, like
and that's totally understandable of just like from a creative artistic perspective, right? Like once you get into that cycle of just doing rinse and repeat, like you kind of feel disillusioned by what you're working on. Like they worked on one game for in Persona 5 for what, like 6-7 years, and that's just one game, right? And before that they had made 4 and 3, and like so that was what, and I assume some of the kind of leads there were still around back in like Persona 2 and Persona 1, right?
yeah.
And so like for 20-25 years they're just working on this one franchise. Like I need to create something new and different, and so yeah, it's totally understandable that they would, leave and start making their own thing, and remake characters from Persona 3 in a fantasy world. But so yeah, and honestly that's why I'm stoked. Like I'm so excited to see a new IP from this creative team, just because it feels like they're able to kind of like unshackle themselves and like, let's just make something really, really cool.
Oh, I know. Like, and even it's such a joke, but it's legitimately one of the most exciting pieces of news we've learned about Metaphor after like that big hour-long video was like, hey, no romance in this game. That's huge for them. Because, like,
Yeah.
back in the day, we used to joke about the fact that, like, the producers and directors of the game would joke about the fact that the only reason romance is in there at all is because they had such bad luck with women in real life, they had to put something in the game as, like, and, like, it shows that we're, like, moving beyond. It's, like, not saying that romance in a game is, like, either to a detriment of it or bad, but it's, like,
Yeah.
there are definitely, it shows a lot of confidence for them to be like, this is very much a Atlas game, but this
Mhm.
is not going to just feel like the next game from the Persona 5 team.
Yeah, like they don't feel like they're beholden to anything, which I love. And definitely, like, to go back to my point of like, once you're kind of stuck in a franchise for so long, you feel like you always have to hit these certain kind of notes, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so again, that's why I'm super stoked for Metaphor, just to see what weird directions they take it with, even just like the kind of flow of open areas, not like full on open world, but like a good old Sonic open zone kind of situation, seemingly, right? And then having those flow into dungeons and all this stuff. It's going to be. I'm really excited to see how that all feels.
And like another one as well with it is like the important thing I do always want to stress with production, because I think like it's a similar thing, thankfully not as long, with like a Final Fantasy 15, of while it had been in pre-production since like 2016, it's also important to know they actually didn't enter full production until after Catherine Full Body. So really this has only been in development for like 5 years tops, which is still a
Interesting.
lot by like game development time, but
Yeah.
like it's one of those things that like, because there are times where like people looked at like how long Persona 5 was in development and they're like, see, this is why it's an 80 to 100 hour long game. Whereas like I look at something like Metaphor and like, and now knowing more details, like we now know with the calendar system and how important time management is, they came out recently and they were like, hey, there is a strict 6 month time. Like you're playing over 6 months over this course of whatever year they're in. And I
Yeah.
think like that like is an interesting thing of being like, I wouldn't be shocked if Metaphor isn't like a crazy long game, but has a
Hmm.
lot of different side diverging paths of being like, I bet your playthrough and my playthrough of Metaphor will be drastically different
Yeah.
based just
Depending on
on.
like what factions we're helping out, what type of people we're recruiting to be a part of our cause and all that stuff. Yeah. And that's the thing I was super stoked to learn about with Metaphor, was like they're kind of keeping at least a version, not like a one-to-one, like 11 to 12 month calendar system, but some sort of calendar system. Because that's the other thing I really love about Persona as well, is like it has such a unique pacing because of the calendar system, because you're playing through a school year, right? And I love that, recontextualizing for Metaphor, it's like, all right, you have 6 months to kind of campaign to be king of this kingdom, right? And I love that. There's a unique flow to it that feels like everything is, kind of like possible to do but it still feels like a kind of funnel, and it's focused, and you're
Yeah,
always going to kind of keep progressing no matter
like I would
what direction
almost
you're
be
going.
excited, and I'm sure other people would feel the exact opposite about this, but like I would actually love it if we could find out that like actually because like of how much like the bonds mechanic in this game is like because like obviously with them not having to worry about making any like romances and stuff for it, that just gives them more opportunities to just make more character bonds and opportunities in the story. I'd actually love to know, hey, you can't do everything in one playthrough. Because there is that thing that I think,
Mm.
because people know there's a way to do the perfect Persona run in a year where you get everyone's social
Yeah.
link maxed out, like, I have to tell people, and I'm like, hey, I think that's like the worst way to play it your first time. If you love playing it like
Yeah,
with
and that's
NeoGAF up,
insane. That's insane to me. I remember kind of complaining, or not like complaining, but it was like one of my dings for Persona 3 Reload specifically is that a trophy to get the platinum is that you have to max out every social link. Which, if you don't know how Persona 3 Reload is structured in terms of availability with a lot of social links and when they're available and how many actual school days you have, it's a very difficult thing to do, and it's not a fun thing to do, even when you're playing it on New Game Plus and you have all the social stats already maxed out and you're just trying to get this one damn trophy. It is not a fun time. And so, and people, and I've talked about this with Persona 3 and Persona 5, people are always like, well, just bring a calendar up and just like follow a guy. It's like, that's not how you're supposed to play
yeah, like
the
that,
game.
like
It's
you
just
don't
like,
live your life with a preset itinerary. Like that's like where like the social sim that I like of Persona is just being like, I don't know if I'm going to like be just studying, doing part-time jobs, stuffing my face with like seafood or whatever, or like
mhm.
making those like memories and stuff for it. Because like when I just know that June 13th is always I have to go hang out with the Gourmet King, that doesn't make my June 13th very memorable. It just means I'm following someone's playthrough for an optimal trophy.
Yeah, and it's like, I'm gonna be real. I don't want to hang out with. I'm blanking on his name. Hold on, I'm trying to pull him up. I don't want to hang out with Mishima from Persona 5. He's a total herb, you know. So it's like,
I
man.
I've never had more like conflicted feelings being a big fan and friend of the show, Sean Chiplock, who voices Mishima. Of like, man, I like you as a person. I cannot care less for this fucking character. I'm like, man,
And like, hey, like that's also like shout out to his performance, because I would say his performance, he nails being a total
his
herb.
character's a tool though, man. He's such a tool.
Oh man, but I couldn't be on this podcast and not throw shade at the boy Mishima, who I would say has a decent enough arc, but yeah, it's less so of it's the way, the writing and all that, but yeah, it's definitely like a, all right, now I have to do the whole calculator thing of, okay, like the Gourmet King is only like is available every day, but all the other students are only available on actual school days, and how do I need to prioritize what and all this stuff? And it's like, that's not how you're supposed to play the game, and that's why like that trophy really annoyed me, because it felt like Atlas being like, or P Studio being like, hey, you should play the game this way. And it's like, no, you should never play the game this way.
I will say I give them a lot of flack. I mean, I give them a lot of slack actually in terms of their trophies getting better. I will always go back to OG Persona 4 Golden having just one of the most unfun platinums known to man.
Oh man, I couldn't even imagine, because even Persona 5, like, I'm sure if I actually stuck with it, maxing out the compendium wouldn't have been
Yeah,
as bad.
Persona 5 is not bad. It's just, yeah, the compendium, like, as someone who's done those for SMT Platinums and Persona Platinums before, this is how it goes. Oh, it doesn't seem that bad. And then by the time you're done, and you've just been looking at fusion calculators all day, you're
And
just
it's like 20 hours of your life.
yeah, you're like, this wasn't fun. Like, I'd rather, like, have, like, worked towards a super boss instead of just made Penis Demon number 4.
Oh man. And that's that just remind me for metaphor, and maybe you know a little bit more about this, at least from the presentation. It seems like just it's not the same SMT kind of demons anymore.
Oh no, yeah. There is so far not a single one crossed over at all with it. They are all brand new designs.
And I love that. Like, I love that they're letting go of it, and not from just a Persona team perspective, but SMT. Like, they've been using these designs for such a long time. I'm excited to see what other weird, messed up things that they're gonna make in terms of either like boss. What are they called in this world? Aren't they calling like
Archetypes?
their archetypes? But also, don't they call like the demons in this game like humans or something like that?
Yes.
Which is awesome. Like I can't wait to see those designs and not like have them not feel beholden to the kind of rinse and repeat that they've been doing for the last few decades. So, God, stoked.
My only thing is, like, I feel like they have to sneak Jack Frost in there somewhere. My only question is how, and like my gut's
You make
telling
him
me
super messed up. You make
no.
him like a really grotesque version of Jack Frost.
Okay, so yes and no. My thought was like, okay, what would I do? It'd be like I would make it like make this version of Jack Frost be this game's Majora's Mask Tingle, where he's just like a creepy old man in like a Jack Frost costume onesie.
That would be great. Or like kind of similar to the Catherine character you see being recruited. Like that, yeah, I could see like an old dude dressed up as Jack Frost, and you have to recruit him to want to follow your cause for some reason. That would be great.
He's got three brothers, but you only see two of them because the third one might just be Jack the Ripper. And looking back in retrospect, making a anthropomorphized rapist murderer probably wasn't the best idea for a marketable trio. But the '90s was weird. We let some things slide.
The '90s was crazy, especially for JRPGs. We all know this. Remember when Hitler came back? That was crazy.
Oh, I'm still waiting, man. The Fuhrer any day now. Any day now. He'll be the super boss of Metaphor. It'll be the Fuhrer with the glasses.
If they, there have been rumors for a long time, or for the last couple of months, of Atlas looking into remakes as well for Persona 1 and the Persona 2 games. Like, what do you think in today's day and age of, like, people being like, yeah, the Fuhrer. Okay, that's a story element. Like, if they ever actually, like, are able to readapt Persona 2 for the modern time, how do you think that lands?
So realistically, and with like the minimalist of insider knowledge that I have with it, the way you're going to see Persona 1 and the 2 duology anytime soon is just going to be the most bare bones PSP
like
port remake. Like
100%.
They will not touch anything because I mean, like even with like Persona 3 Reload being a great example. Outside of just really, really, really big events that like they think we should probably change this for the West, and even then, damn man, there's still some things in Reload that I'm like, wow, you kept that in there, huh? Good for you, Good for you guys. Yep. So I would feel really confident that like they've already tried to hide the Fuhrer to the least of their abilities before with the glasses of like because they know. If they change it, like, what are they going to do? Change it to Mussolini?
Yeah.
And just call him, like, we'll give him a pompadour and call him the Moose and give him, like, a greaser jacket. No one will know.
God. Man. Yeah, and that was the interesting thing. When those rumors were coming about, people were like, well, when are they ever going to work on Persona 6? And it's like, again, I have literally no insider information on Atlas or any sorts of industry. I make the mics go for podcasts.
You make the mics go burr. That's your job.
Yeah, that's my job. So I have no insider information on that stuff. But just on the outside looking in, it's like it's not like they're pushing back production on Persona 6 to fast track a Persona 1 and Persona 2 remake.
Yeah,
that's insane.
So the Royal team has been working on it since 2020 at the earliest. So it's for sure it's been in full active development for a very long time. This is just one of those weird things of this is the most titles they've released in between mainline. That makes it kind of seem like it's also kind of being more pushed back than it really is. And on top of it, people need to realize, for the first time since Persona 3, this is an entirely new team who their jobs have just been make a good game better. So now they have to just make the good game first. They can't just make it better.
Yeah, which is like a huge undertaking, and I do think not a lot of it. Like, we're in the know. I assume the audience listening in on this is like in the know of understanding the kind of leadership change, all that stuff from 7 years ago. But I think a lot of people just kind of assume of like, man, this team, like they took forever to make Persona 5. They're taking forever to make it. Well, it's like, well, the team that made Persona 5 isn't fully the same team anymore.
Yeah, and there's a lot of like you would either have to know or be educated kind of moments that even like people who like listen to this may not know of, like who the hell was the like who really knew that Soul Hackers was made by like half the TMS team and half the like SMT like 4 and others think like DS team to with
Mhm.
it of like when they see it, like they're lucky if they know, like your normal Atlas fan is lucky to know who P Studio is, let
Right.
alone like Studio Zero is not really like no one looked at Catherine Full Body and was like, oh, my favorite Studio Zero. I love them. So like realistically, it's tough, especially with like how big the teams have gotten and expanded. Like I was talking about this recently, and it's like this is insane to me when you think about in 12 months they're releasing 4 internally developed, not outsourced games at all. Of from November of last year to October of this year,
Yep.
Tactica was P Studio, P3R was P Studio, the SMT team was by Atlas internal, and then Metaphor by the Studio Zero. Like that's insane that they have somehow lined all of those up for release. Now, obviously, all those had drastically different development timelines, but
Yeah.
still, that's hundreds of people for what at the end of the day is a pretty small Japanese publisher.
I didn't realize that. I just kind of assumed that Tactica was
We
outsourced just because it was a
we all
different
assumed, like
genre.
literally when that game came out, my first question was the first person I know who had a review code and beat it. I went up to them and I said, "Rip me the ending footage, and I'm going to read the entire credits because I'm like, there is no way in hell this studio made." And they did, and like they have a history of making SRPGs, but like they haven't made like something like this ever. This is like such a left turn for them on the level of something like the dancing games, where
Yeah.
ironically, like the whole thing with the dancing games, which was funny, was originally was supposed to just be a Project Diva Hatsune Miku ripoff, but then they took it away from the devs and were like, no, 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 we need to add like a legit story and everything to this with it. So like P Studio has such weirdly flexible chops, and the fact that like
Yeah.
Tactica was not only outsourced but was as good as it was for a first attempt is insane to me.
Yeah, that's so like that's really impressive that they were able to kind of like fit that and understand the flow of like a grid system kind of battle system and kind of inject the modern persona kind of markings into it. That was like really impressive because like assumed it was a striker situation of like, all right, we're gonna kind of like produce like kind of look over the shoulder of why am I blanking on the team that does those games?
Oh, Omega Force.
Yeah, like we're gonna look over the shoulder of Omega Force the entire time and like kind of make sure like they're nailing kind of evolving the Persona 5 combat into like their big action type of stuff, and make sure the story's looking good and all that stuff. But that was definitely that team's bag in terms of gameplay. That like I feel like there's no way the P Studio team could have ever done that themselves, and I felt the same way with Tactical. I was like, there's no way they could have done this themselves, and so that's crazy to learn. I did not know that. Hello, I no longer hear you. If you're still here, Spencer.
Oh no, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, you're good. I somehow had muted myself and
Yeah.
had forgotten about that. No, but I was saying it's so funny because like you look at a Tactica and like I don't think anyone would be mistaken for thinking, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, this is a situation of like a Persona Q, where even though that's like another internal Atlas studio with the Etrian Odyssey team, that's a very different team
Right.
versus like no, 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 this is our baby.
Yep.
But I have probably got to start wrapping up on my side here. I've got a bajillion and one things I could still poke and prod and ask you about, such as why you have to hurt me by ranking the dancing game so low. But it's okay.
Well,
I understand how it is.
here's
Some
the thing:
people love music.
they're not good games. That's the thing. And here, like, I love rhythm. Like, I'm a huge rhythm guy. Like, I'm a percussionist. I love, like, even though it throws me off, like, for the longest time of playing like a Guitar Hero or a Rock Band, like those games are still so fun. Um, and there's just something about the design of, and I imagine this probably fit a bit better for the Vita. for
Oh yeah.
Persona
Oh
4
no, yeah.
dancing.
Sucks
Of
playing on the
having,
TV. Absolutely
yeah,
sucks
like
playing on the
having
TV.
the kind of prompts come in from the edge of the screen, and yeah, playing Persona 4, 3, and 5 dancing, which like I forget why at IGN I got the codes for the special edition of Persona 4 dancing, but thank God I did, because I think there's no way to get Persona 3 and 5 dancing anymore for whatever reason. Or no, I think it's the other way around. Persona 4 dancing on console
Yes, so
is like
Persona 4 is a weird one of like it was marketed as the only way to get the PS4 version. It was never sold a la carte. You have to buy the Dancing All Night Endless bundle. Now you can
yeah.
still digitally buy it and it goes on sale for like $20 every now and then, which is pretty good. But like ironically, I think if you have a physical copy, like if you bought that physical collector's edition with the download code, that voucher's expired though.
Oh, of course. But yeah, like thankfully I had like Persona 4 dancing ready to go, because I that story was, it was neat, it was cute. And the other games, it's like I don't know, like because Michael Hyam, a homie of the show, like he was also giving me a lot of grief on that too, especially for Persona 3. And I think I don't know, I came in with a different expectation, and I don't know,
I will say, Barrett,
yeah.
as a self-proclaimed Persona 5 lover, as you are, I'm at least proud of the fact that you knew including 19 remixes of River in the Desert was not a good idea.
Oh my god, like the soundtrack is so boring for Persona 5,
Now, like,
man.
to be fair, and especially there are so many things you could go back on and do
And then
differently.
they do like live renditions for like the dancing games. It's like I don't need the live version to dance it. Like just give me more different songs.
I will say this. The fact that they rushed that out as quickly after just Persona 5 was definitely a big mistake. Think about, though, if they obviously, A, were cheap and did DLC, which would be way easier, or just released it now in a post-Tactica, Strikers, Royal World, all of those songs that you could add in there. Like, I'll
Oh
fuck with
man.
the remix of I Believe any day.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So
100%.
obviously, Armchair Game Dev is like the easiest one to do with that game because like I'm, as someone who like knows about the
Actually,
development of that one.
thinking about it more, no, I would not want to remix I Believe. I'm sorry. That track is too emotionally charged for me that I would not want to dance remix to that.
Well, I have bad news for you because you're gonna have to pay Atlas $35 to hear it in Persona 3 Reload for zero point 0.5 seconds and never actually enjoy the full song. The fact that that's like a dungeon-only theme is so funny to me. I'd just be like, you know what song I love hearing only the first 15 seconds of is I Believe. It really
Yeah.
hits home.
Yeah, that's an interesting choice. The collector's edition bundles and stuff has just like always been such a weird choice to me in terms of just like what is the goal here. Obviously, they make money from it because they keep doing it. Like they did it for Persona 5 Royal with like all of the costume bundles, all the music tracks. And all this stuff.
I will never forget. I was like one of the first people to like do the like DLC, like buy the bundle and show off the bundle for the DLC of Persona 5. And I remember the second it was out, I gave it a 1-star review immediately and told people, please don't be like me. I'm only buying this to show you all and to let you all know that this is a complete
I'm
waste of
buying
money.
this to save you.
Because like people don't understand that selling a DLC pack for Kasumi costumes that you could use in literally only one dungeon might be
Oh
the most stupid thing I've ever seen in my life.
God, I forgot about the Kasumi stuff.
That'd be
Man.
like if that would be like if Persona 3 with a very certain C's member had DLC exclusive weapons. It's like, oh sweet, I can't wait to use this weapon and costume pack for
I
1
mean,
month.
are we sure that like well, I guess it is just the velvet costume and background music set. But I was like, are we sure maybe in the update that we're getting at some point this month we might get some weird weapons or whatever.
Yeah,
'Cause, yeah,
you'll just get the Velvet Room piano to start chucking at people.
yeah. Oh, that'd be great. How you feeling about and this just I know we got to wrap up here, but
No,
something
you're
I want
good.
to ask you is how are you feeling about episode Aegis in a few months?
I've talked about it a bit on this show. I've definitely got the unpopular opinion of, unlike the Persona 5 DLC, I'm not instantly 1-star reviewing it. I think people have a very skewed opinion, and obviously everyone's very opinionated when it comes to like games and prices and DLC, and especially being like feeling like entitled that the answer should have been there. I'm
Mm,
someone on the side of this. I'm someone who should not like this, as I am not a big fan of the answer to begin with. I am
mm,
excited because of how much good changes they made to Persona 3 Reload, that I think there's a way they could save that story and make that interesting, of that new dungeon showing those characters and like giving it a full production budget. If that
yes.
trailer's like it is, I think the way they sold it was just going to piss everybody off, because they're looking at it like a season pass, which Atlas has never done.
Yeah,
Atlas,
the bundling it all together, I think, was a not a good
exactly.
choice.
Like if they had even just been like, "Hey, just give the Velvet Skin and the music DLC away, or give it a separate thing." The fact that it's a forced bundle, making people think that like, why am I paying $35 for some costumes and
Yep.
music like 6 months in advance? When like in reality, the answer is going to be like a 30 to 40 hour long experience. So like, I will
And
be.
we'll see in terms of gameplay wise, like I think the biggest overhaul the answer is it's someone who really enjoys the answer for the story it
Mhm.
provided as kind of like this post mortem of Persona 3 of just like, hey, let's break down everybody's kind of feelings after all the main events, right? And I really treasure it for that, and so that's why I was personally like, man, I when Reload was first announced, I was like, man, I wish they were doing the added what's it called the answer. I wish they were adapting the answer as well. Um, and so I think I'm so stoked for what are they're calling it, like episode I guess or something like that.
Mhm.
Because I think it's the most potential to just be so improved in terms of like, yeah, it's not a fun like campaign to play. It is very monotonous. It is very repetitive. And I think with like the gameplay updates they already made for Persona 3 Reload, I think like that's gonna definitely you're gonna already feel a kind of big overhaul for that. But then at the same like on the other side, like I just wonder if there's a lot that they could touch up to maybe make it like a 20-hour campaign and not like a 35-hour campaign, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, like, there's obviously like a lot of wiggle room in terms of like they can make a lot of stuff optional with it, but like I think
Mm,
kind of even going back to the $70 argument, like I will be very shocked if people who are going into it with an open mind and an open wallet play that DLC and think this was not worth $35, because I think that team
right.
is aware that that's a lot of money, but that's also like they've been very upfront with it, of being like, this is a lot to add on, and we had no intention of making this, which I do believe. I do
Yeah.
believe they had no intention of making it for it, and again, kind of going back to like what we expect is just default knowledge for a lot of people. There are people out there who I'm sure just think something as easy as slapping a female protagonist skin is like a $5 DLC that could be their day one.
Yeah, and that's like yeah, and that's like always the weird thing of trying to explain to people who aren't as familiar with Persona 3, especially of like, all right, well, the answer, at least like before we knew we were getting it right, it was like, I'm bummed that it's not here. I would like it if it's here. I understand that it's a lot of work because it's like Persona 3 in and of itself is already like a 65 to 80 hour JRPG. That's a lot of work. So adding another 20, 30 hours of game is also going to be a huge ton of work. And the team has stated that they're fans of the original game. I get that. And then the kind of complaint of like, well, we also want FemC, and it's like, here's the like making that in Persona 3 portable, which is like way more visual novelty than the other like mainline Persona modern games and stuff. Like I think that was like you traded off work in a sense of you're not fully fleshing out. You're making it a bit more point and click, but then yeah, we can have like resources and kind of time being spent working on an alternate story, alternate type of social links, alternate romances, all of this stuff. And the amount, I don't think people appreciate the amount of work that would have to go into putting that into Reload, because at that point you're not remaking one game, you're remaking two games, and that is a lot of work for what they are doing for this. So it's a tough one. It's a tough conversation to have, but it's like one where I'm like, okay, I kind of get why they didn't do FemC.
Yeah, and I mean, hey, they gotta save something for the Switch 2 launch title of Persona
Yeah.
3 Re-Reload.
Yeah, Persona 3 Reload, Royal Blue, for sure. What do you think when they eventually get to Persona 4? What do you think the title is?
It's got to be an R title, unfortunately. As much as I love the Golden, my only guess with it would be like, it's tough just because with you've got the gun. Royal kind of ish makes sense, but with Persona 4, it's tough. It would just be like, God, I don't know. Yeah, like it's tough just because there's so many different weird little themes they could go for it, but nothing's
Yeah.
no one word stands out for me just because I'm like, I know it would have to have like R in there somewhere because now
Yeah.
we've got the new blank number R.
The popular one I've seen is Rewind. But I personally like Rerun, and I know like younger people are not going to understand what like rerun means. But there's just something about that, especially I think they have to go with the TV, like the television theme. So, that'll be a fun one that we'll get in 6 years.
Man, I feel like I would be shocked if the P3R team almost didn't just immediately go into P4G, if they're not just immediately not getting absorbed into P6.
Yeah,
but I mean, at this point, I wouldn't be shocked just because 3 sold way better than I thought it was going to.
I would imagine, especially if they've been working on 6 for roughly 4 years, like full on production 4 years at this point. And I would assume trying to release 6 in the next year or two, I would assume that they're like, hey, no, we need to prioritize y'all coming in and helping us in any little ways that you can. And then having that team splinter off again and then working on another remake. Just because they're probably, I could see just where we're at in the timeline of all this stuff. I could see them really trying to get like, all right, we need to wrap Persona 6 up soon.
we gotta not have this be in development as long as Persona 5, because Jesus H. Christ, that game was in development a long time.
Yep.
Well, wrapping up, we've already kind of talked about where people can find you with Kind of Funny. Where online do you want people to Persona stalk you?
You can find me in my online persona on social media platforms at Sadboy Barrett. SADBOYBARRETT. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Threads, all the other social media platforms. And yeah, you can find, like I said at the top of the show, youtube.com/kindoffunnygames. I'm usually like on the, other side of the camera, pressing the 1s and 2s and all that stuff. But I often pop up on our daily shows as kind of the peanut gallery, giving my 2 cents. If there's any like Batman related news or Persona related
if there's
things.
if there's any sad Batman news, they want to put your face on the camera for it. Get a couple of clicks on that one for it.
Which is the only type of news we ever get when it comes to Batman video games. But if there's ever like a Persona thing, piece of news, you can always almost 100% of the time be guaranteed that I'll pop on and give my 2 cents and all that. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, big shout out. I will do a truncated outro. As always, you can always find the show Facebook, Discord, Twitter, all the fun stuff. Subscribe on YouTube, listen, iTunes reviews, all that stuff is linked. So if you're listening to this, you can just scroll down, find all that. Best way to support the show, though, just like Kind of Funny, you can always go to patreon.com/SMTN. Big shout-outs to all of our executive producers, so big thanks, as always, to Michael, Bell, Preachers, Sabrina, don't know why that one was so weird to say, Cosmic Illumi, Stewart, Budweiser Tall Cans, Carlos Hernandez, Cameron Sharp, K-Horse, Cross Rinrin, Dozy Bear, Jazzy Jefferson, Winnie Jagingis, and Steven and Patrick, and I think that's it. All right. Nope. And Solar, there was one more. I knew I was forgetting one. Thank you all so much. Whether you support us at $1, share the show, just listening to the show, and just being there. Always appreciate you guys. Barrett, I appreciate you for definitely going over 90 minutes with me, so I apologize. First and foremost to my wife, who I definitely have had waiting now at this point, but at this point, she's broken, man. I'll tell her, honey, I swear this time, it's going to be 90 minutes. It's going to be 90 minutes, and she's just like, "Why do you even tell me this anymore? It's never that way."
Hey, we went 10 minutes over, and here's the thing: it could have been 2.5 hours.
Oh yeah, immediately talking, I'm like, I've got a bad feeling that I could have just turned this into a Persona 5 Tactica spoiler cast dangerously quickly. We need to we need to just talk about the fact not enough people in this goddamn fandom are talking about how good of a character Toshiro and Arena are.
Oh my god, so underrated, and we got to cut ourselves off. The last thing I'll say, we got to cut ourselves off. The last thing I'll say is that those original characters hit me a bit more than the original characters in Strikers, but that's just me. God, I love them.
That's why honestly, when I eventually realized with Tactica, I was like, they legitimately could have just called this game Persona 5 Toshiro, and that would have made just as much sense. All right, well, Barrett, thank you for listening. Thank you for also talking with us. It was a pleasure. I will definitely try and drag you on here soon. Probably after, unfortunately, you get to play Metaphor and I do not next month, because let's be honest, there's no way that game's not going to be demoed at SGF.
Well, that's the unfortunate thing. You'll have to get into Blessings DMs again, because I will not be. I usually don't go to SGF. I'm usually like our
I thought Keeley was just going to fly you down a build. Like he was just going to give you like a little Steam Deck with a little mini Metaphor on there.
No, I run all of our home base operations for SGF, so definitely in a month, check us out. We'll be live reacting to a bunch of stuff. We'll live react to probably a Metaphor trailer at an Xbox show, probably, or whatever. If Metaphor is demoed at SGF, I would assume that Blessing or Greg would play it. So, but again, I know nothing. I just make the ones and twos and cameras and mics and all that stuff go. So, that's
the occasional multi-hour long analysis video every now and
then. Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you again for listening. We will see you next week. Goodbye.